Welcome to the Explainer. So, as we were digging into the source material for today's topic, we stumbled onto what I can only describe as a complete paradigm shift. I mean, we're going to be looking at the very fabric of how we operate day to day. And honestly, the biggest takeaway here is that life might actually be laughably simple. That is, if we just stop overcomplicating it. Right off the bat, there's this quote from our source material that just sets the stage perfectly. I'm about to ruin your entire worldview in the best possible way. Seriously, I love that. Because look, if you're anything like me, you might be totally exhausting yourself trying to hunt down that perfect 300-page self-help book. Or maybe you're trying to memorize some grueling 47-step morning routine, right? We kind of tend to think that success and happiness are these impossibly complex puzzles. But as you'll see, the data suggests they really, really aren't. Okay, let's dive into this. Why do we actually do this? Why do we hunt for these crazy, complex, trademarked secrets? Well, the reality is simple answers like eat less, move more, or just communicate better are, well, let's face it, they're boring. Simple doesn't sell millions of books or make us feel special. And the grand misdirection that we all fall for is that our desperate search for complexity is exactly what's making our lives so difficult in the first place. Enter something called the backwards law. Now, this concept absolutely shattered my assumptions about effort. The psychological paradox here is that desperately trying to force an outcome actually actively repels it. Like, think about sleep for a second. You can't force yourself to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more wide awake you feel. It's exactly like trying to float in water by swimming harder. You don't float, right? You just sink faster. The real secret is effort without the desperation. And that brings us right into the control paradox. Over 2,000 years ago, the ancient Stoics actually figured this whole thing out. Basically, on one hand, you've got your circle of concern. This is stuff like traffic, the weather, what other people think of you. You can't control literally any of that. But on the other hand, you have your circle of influence, which is just your actions and your reactions. Grasping for control over everything else is like trying to squeeze water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. We really have to stop trying to be the CEO of life and instead, maybe just be a surfer, riding the waves. Now let's shift gears for a minute from philosophy over to biology, because wow, this is where things get genuinely fascinating. Your brain is essentially a walking supercomputer. Think about it. It weighs roughly 3 pounds and is made of 60% fat, yet it burns a massive 20% of your daily calories just by sitting there thinking. And because it's running so incredibly hot all day long, it requires a literal night shift crew just for maintenance. Okay, this was honestly one of the wildest scientific discoveries in the research. Check this out. While you are in deep sleep, your brain cells physically shrink. They actually contract to create space so that cerebral spinal fluid can rush in and wash away all the toxic metabolic waste that build up during the day. Your brain literally acts like a dishwasher for your thoughts. It's wild. And this is exactly why just one single night of poor sleep leaves you feeling so foggy and cluttered. So, your brain is all refreshed, right? And you set your sights on chasing happiness. But, bam, here we hit a massive psychological roadblock known as the happiness trap. Neuroscience shows us that we actually have a happiness set point, which is governed by what's called the hedonic treadmill. And the data here is mind-blowing. It reveals that whether you win the lottery or, heaven forbid, suffer a terrible accident, you will likely return to your exact baseline level of happiness in about 6 months. 6 months. Happiness literally runs away when you chase it directly. It turns out it's a byproduct of meaning, not a destination you can just arrive at. Now, with all this incredible computing power humming along in our heads, we really like to think of ourselves as highly rational beings. So let me just ask you, is your brain actually a reliable, truth-seeking machine? Well, the short answer is absolutely not. No way. Your brain is really merely a pattern-matching machine, and it happens to suffer from some pretty grand illusions of objectivity. And this brilliantly illustrates our hardwired survival filters at work. You've got confirmation bias, which makes you cherry-pick evidence. Then there's the halo effect, which literally tricks you into thinking attractive people are somehow inherently smarter. And loss aversion? That makes you terrified of losing $100, like way more than you'd actually enjoy finding $100. It's crazy. We basically walk around all day with these invisible Instagram filters for reality. We are constantly judging others by their actions, while of course totally forgiving ourselves based purely on our intentions. So if you still think you're a purely logical creature after all that, consider this breakdown. 90% of your decision-making is entirely emotional. Only 10% is logical. Meaning, your rational mind isn't actually driving the car here. It's really just sitting over in the passenger seat, furiously narrating the trip and, rationalizing the gut feelings that you've already chosen to act on. To really anchor just how powerful that emotional override is, check out this staggering number, 500,000. That is how many times faster your emotional brain processes information compared to your logical brain. Let that sink in. Before you can even begin to formulate a conscious, rational thought, your emotions have already processed millions of microsignals and practically made the decision for you. And if you can't trust your logic, well, can you at least trust your past? I actually love this vivid metaphor from our source material. They say your memories aren't recordings. They're more like Wikipedia pages that anyone can edit, and the main editor is you. I mean, wow. Your brain essentially acts like this completely unreliable narrator that's just pretending to be a rigid documentary filmmaker. Honestly, the science here is almost unsettling. The very act of recalling a memory actually makes it physically malleable in your brain. That means confident courtroom testimonies, or even your deepest, most cherished childhood memories, can be up to 40% absolute fiction. But, and here is the really profound takeaway, if you are already the editor of your own past, you have the immense power to consciously edit which parts of your story you want to emphasize moving forward. Okay, now that we kind of decoded the brain, let's look at the actual math of life. Because life isn't fair, it is exponential. The famous 80-20 rule dictates that just 20% of your habits, your relationships, and your tasks produce 80% of your joy and your results, which means the other 80% of what you do every single day, it's largely just expensive noise. So to optimize that vital 20%, we really have to look at our autopilot system. We're talking about habit loops. A habit loop is basically a permanent neural highway consisting of a cue, a routine, and a reward. And as experts point out, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your brain doesn't care at all if a habit is ruining your life or saving it, it just runs the program for about 40% of your day. And because these neural highways are permanent, you can never actually just hit delete on a bad system. You can only replace it with a better one. So here is exactly how you hack that autopilot. Step 1, keep the cue. Let's say your cue is feeling stressed. Skip to step 3, keep the reward. You still get your stress relief. The real magic happens right in the middle, at step 2, upgrading the routine. So instead of reaching for junk food, you drop and do some push-ups. You satisfy the exact same neural loop, but you get a radically better outcome. It's all about building a system that reinforces a new identity, right? You're actively proving to yourself that you are someone who handles stress with action rather than distraction. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens when you start upgrading those systems. You tap into the sheer massive scale of the compound effect. Just look at this number, 3,778%. If you make just a tiny 1% improvement daily, you don't just get 365% better over a year. Because it compounds, you actually experience a 3,778% yearly improvement. You literally become over 37 times better at whatever system you are focusing on. Let's ground this 1% math with some hard data. Reading just 10 pages a day turns into 12 whole books a year. Saving a measly $5 a day, that becomes over $1,800 plus interest. But I do have to give you a word of warning here. This mathematical rule is absolutely merciless, and it totally works in reverse. If you get 1% worse daily, say by skipping workouts over and over, you don't just stay the same. You drop down to a mere 3% of your original baseline. These small choices, they seem totally meaningless in the moment, until suddenly they compound into your permanent reality. So if we take a step back and distill everything we've looked at today down to its absolute essence, we basically get the ultimate cheat code for life. Number 1, accept what you cannot control, which is almost everything. Number 2, master what you actually can control, which is just your actions and your reactions. And number 3, compound tiny 1% improvements every single day. Life really isn't about wandering around aimlessly trying to somehow find yourself. It is about actively creating yourself, choice by choice and system by system. Well, you now have the manual. You understand the simple math. So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. If your destiny is built choice by choice, what is the single 1% improvement you will choose to compound today? Seriously, pick just one simple thing and start building. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you on the next one.